to this, the 2019-20 Wye Valley Trust Annual General Meeting. This is a virtual meeting on YouTube Live, and we hope members of the public find it a helpful format in terms of understanding what has been going on in the Trust over the last year, and in particular to hear some of the successes that as a Trust we want to share with members of the public. We do hope members of the public find it a useful process, this in the age of social distancing, to be able to engage with the Board of Directors. We do have some questions at the end which have already been received, which we will be answering. But if members of the public during the course of the AGM want to ask subsequent questions, if you can do so up to 48 hours afterwards, and we will answer those and put the answers to your questions onto our website. Tonight we'll be doing a series of formal business in terms of the annual accounts and the annual report and the quality accounts. We'll also be hearing from members of staff about some of the great things we've been doing. But before we do get into the formal business, I just want to put on record my enormous thanks and the thanks of all of the Board of Directors for the phenomenal efforts of every single member of staff at the Trust. Our frontline teams have done absolutely heroic efforts to protect and to look after members of the public, particularly over the last 4 months. The challenges of COVID-19 can't be underestimated, but it's not just our frontline teams who have done a phenomenal job. It's also the cleaning teams, the catering teams, all of the ambulance teams, all of the community and volunteers that have got involved. It really has been a total team effort. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, we want to give thanks to you. It also would be remiss of me not to recognise the enormous sadness of people who have been affected by COVID-19, particularly those who have lost loved ones. And so on behalf again of the Board of Directors, we want to know that we are understanding of the real challenges of being separated from loved ones during this terrible illness, and in particular if one has had to say goodbye to a loved one under the circumstances of social distancing. We do understand how awful that has been. So moving on to the formal business, we don't have any apologies for absence. The first bit of formal business is the minutes of the annual public meeting of July the 11th, which I will take as read. I will propose them. Can I ask Richard Humphries, please, to second the formal minutes?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Can I therefore ask the Board of Directors to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2019, and please just come off mute if you do not approve them. On that basis, the minutes of the meeting of July the 11th 2019 are approved. We then move on to the introduction to the annual report, and it's my pleasure to introduce Glenn Burney. Glenn.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for everyone who's joined us on YouTube. I'm going to take us very quickly through some slides which introduce the annual report. It's quite a full document, so if you want to see the entire document, which I hope you do, if you go onto our website, it'll be there tomorrow for people to look at. It contains a lot of information about the organisation, our performance for the year, our governance arrangements, our approach to risk. Also within that, we include our annual accounts and our quality accounts, and we'll be looking at those two briefly a little bit later. So if I could have the next slide, please. So firstly, we look back on a year where we had a further inspection from the Care Quality Commission, CQC. Our objective in the inspection was to do better than the last one. We did, we made progress. I think we're getting very close to getting a good rating. You can see that from the elements of the rating that are highlighted on this report. Getting a good for care across the board, getting a good rating for community services, And also, probably most significantly, a good rating overall for urgent and emergency care. Having a look at that across the NHS, there are very few urgent and emergency care services that achieve that rating overall. There are some things that we need to improve, and we've acted on those immediately, and we very much look forward to the CQC coming back as quickly as they possibly can. They're working in different circumstances at the moment, but we hope to get re-inspected soon so that we can move up a notch as an organisation to recognise the really good work that everyone has done on quality focus. So next slide, please. Good example of that will be the work that we've done on what we call hashtag Wye Valley Way, which is valuing patients' time. This is an entire programme where we engaged with frontline staff to improve our urgent and emergency care pathway. And we'll give you a little bit of an example of that a bit later on the agenda. But lots of staff were engaged in this. We developed some really significant improvements to care. It was actually reported and noted in the CQC report about how well this had come on. What this enables us to do is to improve the flow in the hospital, to ensure that we improve safety, but also our productivity and efficiency. And you can see some pictures there. Firstly, the picture at the bottom there was before social distancing, of course, but the one above that is showing the corridor that we have where we've got live projects where every week staff members are looking at how we've made improvements on it. And it's been really good to see that. In fact, we stood out nationally in the strategy to reduce long stay patients in the NHS. Next slide, please. We also report in the annual report against performance on the national standards and targets, and those, I won't go into all the details of those, but they cover things like cancer waiting times, elective waiting times from referral to treatment, and things like A&E performance. And the improvements in flow that I mentioned before have had an impact on certainly improving the way that we deliver urgent care. And the demand, though, has continued to rise over the last couple of years, and we've seen significant increases pre-COVID in the amount of activity coming through the door. But these are challenging times for the NHS, and one of the things that we'll be focusing on over the coming months will be how we recover performance from an NHS perspective, particularly on things like the referral to treatment times. We've maintained cancer access throughout COVID-19, and therefore that has been relatively maintained, but certainly elective waiting times is something we'll focus in on over the coming months. So on the next slide, we look at our mortality improvements. We stood out nationally last year on this, and again this year. When you look at the significant improvements in how we have analysed our mortality and our overall mortality performance compared to other organisations, I look back for the AGM and where we were 2 or 3 years ago, where we were an outlier, and we had a higher mortality rate than you would have expected based on the statistical modelling. But now we are well within the normal. In fact, we're just below the expected level of mortality for our organisation. And that's been delivered through a whole range of improvements. Some of those that I referred to on the previous slide around urgent emergency care play into this, but lots of pathway improvements that the clinical teams have put in place. So if you look at the next slide, you can see where we now rate against all the other trusts in the NHS. If you'd looked at that slide a few years ago, we would have been over to the left there, very close to the end of one of the organisations that was outside the expected range. But we're now performing very well. In fact, I look at this from a group perspective, and Wye Valley is performing better than other parts of the group at the moment, which is a really significant improvement. One of the things about the group is that we've been able to share best practice. So being able to bring things into other parts of the group from Wye Valley, looking at the experiences of the Wye Valley Way and other improvements has been it's been really rewarding, and it's been great testimony to the staff that we've been able to demonstrate group leading performance in Wye Valley Trust. On the next slide is probably one of the more significant improvements for us. When you look at all the indicators for the NHS, the one that I always look to every year is the annual staff survey. This is where our staff tell us how we're performing as an organisation, and that is benchmarked against the other parts of the NHS. It's the biggest survey in the world, actually, of employees. Our annual survey results this year significantly improved. In the chart at the top right there, you can see the main key lines of inquiry. There's only one that didn't improve in the year, and that's one that we'll be focusing on this year, which is around equality, diversity and inclusion. But we've also seen significant improvements in recruitment and retention. We've seen reductions in usage of agency staff. And that over the years has been one of the issues for Wye Valley, where we've had more agency staff than most trusts. It's been a financial burden, but it's also been a quality burden. But really significant improvements on recruitment and retention now mean that we've got very few vacancies across the organisation, both in nursing and in medical staff. In fact, we were doing some reviews today looking at that, and almost fully established in the surgical division, for example. So really good work on that, and these indicators are the most important ones for me, which I'm very proud to present this evening. The next slide talks about where we've moved on digital over the years. So a lot of action on this, and quite a bit of our expenditure from a capital perspective was on moving forward a number of these projects. So we've moved to a situation where we've deployed a community electronic patient record, where we're integrating that with colleagues in health and social care across our Herefordshire place, as we call it. We've moved forward on electronic prescribing. That's been rolled out across the organisation. We have IMS Maxims, which is our core PAS system, our EPR system, which is now also being looked at across the group to see whether it's something we could roll out group-wide, and lots of other examples of how we move forward, particularly the one at the bottom there, where we were able to bring in state-of-the-art imaging technology through a partnership with Philips. So on the next slide, we talk about our kind of wider integration strategy. We have a strategy as an organisation to be the lead provider in our system. We take responsibility of that very seriously. We're not just a hospital, we're not just community services, we're an anchor organisation in our local community. And so some initiatives there, which I would want to say at this point, the relationships that we have with partner organisations, whether it be local GP Federation or social care colleagues, are really, really strong. And that's allowed us to get a really, really joined up system in Herefordshire. And Home First, the single care record, are great examples of that. So on the next slide, we give a very brief overview, and I won't go into the details because Howard will give us a bit more of the detail of this in a moment. But alongside all of those quality improvements that we've signalled over the previous slides, we also managed to deliver against what was a very challenging financial target for the year. So credit to Howard and his team, but for the whole organisation to deliver that. As a consequence of delivering that challenge, we earned an extra £18 million from central NHS coffers into the county, which has helped us to deliver a whole range of improvements, including those capital items that are referred to there. Next slide talks about our objectives. So we set out for the coming year a number of key objectives. We do those both at organisational level, increasingly at the system level in our Herefordshire place, but also some things we're doing across the group. And as I look at these for the year ahead, it kind of takes me back to a few years ago when we first started working in a group, and when I first joined the organisation. We had a 10-point plan at that point. And if you look back at that 10-point plan, it talked about a whole range of things. Reducing our agency staff, improving our staff morale, improving urgent care, improving the way that our elective services work. And one of the other things that was on that list was the need to sort the estate out of the organisation. So one of the things that I'm really pleased of this year is we've started to build the hotted ward replacement scheme. So you look at that list of 10 priorities, we've delivered on all of them. And it's really pleasing to look back and see the progress that we've made. So my final slide is just simply a thank you to all of the staff that work within the organisation. As Russell said, we've tested the commitment of staff significantly over the last few months with COVID-19, and they've not been found wanting. They've worked incredibly hard. They've worked different roles. They've been particularly challenged through increased demand, through increasing our critical care capacity, but they've come through. They've come through a lot of that through the support from the community. So I'd like to thank the community for doing the clapping on Thursday evenings, for the donations, for the support and the goodwill they've shown to our staff, which has really helped to lift everyone. I'd also like to thank our volunteers, our legal friends, all of our partner organisations, some of whom I've already referenced. Very proud of what we've achieved over the last year, and I hope you all enjoy reading the detail in the annual report, which is on our website. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And as Glenn has indicated, a year of real progress for the Trust, for the community and for the welfare of the people of Herefordshire. We now move on to extracts from the annual accounts for 2019-20. I'm pleased to introduce Howard Oddy, our Director of Finance and Information. Howard.
Thank you very much, Chair. And evening, everyone. Before looking at the actual accounts, which I will do briefly, I just wanted to make a point about the different conditions under which we had to produce the accounts this year. Obviously, it's been an incredibly difficult time for everyone, but it certainly was unusual having to produce the annual accounts with the whole finance department working from home, and then having an audit conducted by auditors working from home and the finance department working from home. And I would just like to place on record my thanks to the whole of the finance team for the production of the accounts in such conditions and for producing quality accounts which received minimal adverse comments. So thank you very much to the finance staff for that. The accounts are available on the website for anyone who would like to actually take a more detailed look. Next slide, please. So Glenn has already alluded to these points, or some of these points, but the key thing is that actually we achieved a lot of the targets which were set. We were set a challenging deficit target of 17.2 million by NHS Improvement, and I'm so pleased to be able to say that we actually did achieve that deficit target. And when we compare it with last year, when we finished the year with a £45 million deficit, this does demonstrate a huge improvement. Included within that, as Glenn mentioned, £18 million of incentive funding, but that was awarded because we were on target to deliver the challenging control total. Within those figures, we actually also delivered savings, the cost and productivity improvements of £6.2 million against a target of £6 million. Glenn also referred to capital expenditure, and again, the targets which measure our performance referred to as the external financing limit and the capital resource limit. I'm pleased to say that we achieved those as well. So it was a successful year for the finance position. Next, please. This slide just summarizes essentially 60 pages of annual accounts on one slide. And what it basically says is that we received income from commissioners for direct patient care of around £193 million and other operating income, such as income from Health Education England, for example, of 38.6 million, making total income of 231.6. Our expenditure was more than that. As you can see, salaries and wages were just below 155 million and goods and services just over 86. And when we put the income against the expenditure and make adjustments, we end up with that adjusted deficit of 17.2 million. But most importantly, that was in line with the control total set by NHS Improvement. Next, please. Last year at the annual general meeting, I referred to the level of borrowing that was required by the Trust in order to actually ensure that we remained a going concern. 1920 proved to be no different, and we actually had to borrow £45.7 million in order to ensure that we kept sufficient cash flow. 34.7 of this related to revenue, i.e. the running costs of the organisation. And this level of borrowing actually took us to a total position of 193.2 million. And that excluded the PFI debt. So just as I said last year, the Trust does face, or certainly did face, a very, very challenging underlying position. But we were and remain constantly in discussion with NHSI about this position. Glenn has already referred to the amount which we spent on capital. So despite or because of this borrowing, we were able to spend £15.3 million on capital. A number of these schemes are still in preparation, assets under construction. And again, as has already been referred to, we spent these amounts, some on the estates in the beginning, the early work on the ward replacement, a lot on medical equipment, including the state-of-the-art radiology department that Glenn's referred to. And we've also spent a lot on IT, again, the schemes which were referred to in Glenn's presentation about digital. So despite that deficit and despite the borrowing, we actually have continued to develop the Trust and make important strides. Next slide, please. So those three earlier slides essentially summarize the information within the annual accounts. But I did think it was important just to make brief comment on the financial regime that we're working under now. In late March, as the pandemic struck, there were some immediate changes to the finance regime, which will impact on our position this year and then presumably what we report on next year at the annual general meeting. With immediate effect, centrally set block contracts were put in place. Initially till the end of July, then till the end of October. We think that these could well be extended until the end of March 2021. And the NHS improvements are actually funding trusts at the moment to ensure that they deliver a break-even position so that the whole deficit scenario doesn't get in the way of providing the care that's required during the pandemic. We are awaiting further guidance on what happens next in this respect. And the huge level of indebtedness that I referred to in terms of the loans that this Trust has had to take out in order to remain a going concern, it is very good news to hear that the NHS has actually decided to abolish the use of loans and to replace it with something called public dividend capital. This will result in a significant reduction in interest payments and should leave the Trust balance sheet looking much more healthy, which obviously will be reporting to the AGM next year. And that concludes my my presentation, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Howard. It's worth emphasising that the 17 million deficit that we achieved last year is the best financial performance that the Trust has achieved in about the last 7 years. So it really was a quite extraordinary performance, and the cost and productivity delivery of over 6 million in percentage terms builds on our success last year, where we were the most improved in terms of productivity Trust in the whole of the Midlands. And just going back partly to what Glenn talked about earlier, in terms of mortality, the improvement in our mortality is the best in the whole of the NHS. So I think both Glenn's presentation and Howard's presentation can give real assurance to members of the public about the improvements we are delivering for the people of Herefordshire. I'd now like to move on to the quality accounts for 2019-20. I'm delighted that Lucy Flanagan, our Director of Nursing, is going to introduce this, and Kathy from our paediatric team. So Lucy, over to you.
A quick introduction from me before I hand over to Kathy. So if you could just move on to the next slide, please. So my job is to present the quality accounts and introduce them. The national requirements for quality accounts this year were relaxed due to the pandemic. and therefore we were in fact given till December to produce the quality accounts. But we felt it was important to produce the quality accounts in line with our annual accounts and our annual report. We've been, as I say, given till December to publish them, but our intention is the board has signed the accounts off, the quality accounts off. The quality accounts has been shared with external stakeholders, as is the requirement, and we aim to publish the quality accounts on NHS Choices by the end of July. This is what it looks like when you see it on NHS Choices, and it's a fairly comprehensive document that goes through a number of things, including the outcomes of the CQC inspection, the progress that we made against the quality priorities during the previous year. It sets out our quality priorities for the forthcoming year. But more importantly, what the account describes is Wye Valley's quality improvement journey. If you could just move us on to the next slide, please. So you heard Glenn earlier talk about hashtag Wye Valley Way. And to quote our Chief Operating Officer, we call it that because it's the way we do things here at Wye Valley. But our approach to our quality improvement journey is to use a methodology called QSA, and that's the little sunflower type on the slide in the left-hand corner. What QSA does is it provides a methodology that provides tips, tools, techniques, and an approach to driving quality and service improvements at a local level. It enables teams to develop their approach and their solutions to improving services and improving quality. And to quote our QSA lead, it enables teams to become masters of their own destiny. All of our quality improvements are around valuing patients' time, and that's been a consistent theme over certainly the last 4 annual public meetings that I've attended. And we've certainly talked in the past annual public meetings around NPJ paralysis and the last 1,000 days, which are all about valuing patients' time. Last year's major hashtag Wye Valley Way valuing patients' time initiative was around discharge, and many of our teams did lots of innovative and amazing things to value patients' time and improve our discharge processes. And it's at this point I want to hand over to Catherine Seagrave, who's our lead consultant for our special care baby unit and for neonates, just to describe what they did as part of that initiative. So the next slide, and hand over to Kathy, please.
Hi, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kathy Seagrave, I'm the paediatric consultant at Hereford, and our project really is looking at valuing patients' time and incorporating parents more actively in the care of their babies whilst they're with us on the special care baby unit. So what we did was introduce some parent-led ward rounds. The next slide, please, Erica. We introduced this because the background of family integrated care is something that we recognise in paediatrics, and it's where the baby is not just a baby on its own that we look after for its weeks or months whilst it's on the unit and then deliver it as a package to a family at the end of its stay when it's ready to go home. The baby is there for the duration, and the family, apart from COVID, are there hopefully for the duration as well. And actually we want to increase their participation in the care of their baby so that they are more involved in everything around looking after that baby, or not just feeding and changing nappies, but doing observations and participating in the ward rounds and participating in discussions. And actually there's evidence that if the parents are recognised as an important part in that process, that actually the baby has better weight gain, better breastfeeding. It reduces parents' anxieties if they know that a team that's looking after their baby wants them to be a part of it and wants them to be involved. They feel that they can discuss their problems and their worries with us without feeling intimidated by the team. So really this was to sort of encourage them to be an active part in all discussions and to be there as much as possible. The benefits that we had from, next slide, Erica, from family integrated care they are able to present their baby on the ward round. As doctors, we look after lots of babies. Lots of babies have similar problems. They're all of a similar age, similar feeding, similar breathing problems, but each baby is unique, and parents are best placed to know them. So rather than a team of doctors leading the ward round, flipping through the notes going, well, when did this baby have this? When did this baby come off that? Or was this the one that had that injection at that point? Or was that the other baby? Parents only have their own child to focus on and know. So they remember when things happened, when the important screening events happened, when the baby had which treatments. So if we allow them to lead the ward round by saying what their problems are with their baby, and particularly actually what's important to them, they can feel part of the team and to know what to do. It's also helped us with communication, because as medics, we sometimes focus on problems with the babies and getting numbers right in blood tests, etc. But actually what parents sometimes want to know is that little skin tag anything to worry about? Is that little rash anything to worry about? We might not mention that on a ward round because to us it's nothing, but to parents it might be something significant. And it also helps us to know that they've taken on board explanations and things that we've explained to them as part of their child's care. So by getting them to tell us what they understand helps us to improve and reinforce things if they've not quite understand a message or got the wrong end of the stick about something. And it allows us to focus on the important bits, which sometimes as doctors we can be accused of not doing, such as when do we think the baby might go home? Are we really worried about the fact they've not done a poo for 24 hours? We might not worry about that. Parents do. And allowing them to lead the ward round allows them to sort of have their worries and concerns addressed in a way that's focused on them rather than us. And we've seen that this is working quite well. We organise this on a sort of, Erica, next slide, sorry. Next slide. We do this sort of twice a week. This was picked as a sort of possibility of something that was achievable and deliverable, ideally every day. And I personally have no problems if there's a parent there and wants to lead every day when I'm on a ward round. But we thought if we set it regularly, parents know when it's going to happen, they can prepare for it. And certainly the first times, it's a very daunting time on a neonatal unit when your baby's unwell and preterm and you're not sure what the future holds. The nurses will support them to know what information to give. And for a lot of mums, they may not want to join in at the start. They might want to get a bit of confidence with us and with their baby before they take part. But they're given some information when they're admitted to the unit to know what to guide them as to what to say. And they'll pick some of that up from us on ward rounds if they didn't want to take part in that in the first instance. And if we know it's at a set time, then parents can plan to be in, they can plan childcare for other children. The consultants and doctors that are running the ward round can plan going and seeing those patients because you know the parents are going to be there. It's much more beneficial, but they don't have to join in. If they don't want to, they can sit and be a part in a passive way of the ward round with us there. We can still ask questions, we can still talk to them and still involve them. Not being the lead on the ward round as a parent doesn't mean we're going to exclude you. So they can lead the way that suits them. And some parents will quite happily reel off the full history of their baby in a very learned medical way, particularly those that have been at the bigger units. And other people are more happy just to say, no, they're fine, we're quite happy, and let us carry on as we do. So how does it look? I took some pictures the other week of how it looks. Some of these are a little bit older. Erica, a couple of pictures. So this is how it's looking. They're not sort of maybe the best photos, but the one on the left is in our intensive care room, and you can't quite see the mum who's behind the incubator where the baby is with one of our consultants. And then the picture on the right is some of our team speaking to a mum around a baby who's in the sort of lower dependency area and taking part in their ward rounds there. We have had some feedback from parents and they've generally felt that it's going well, and the consultants and doctors are generally happy with how things are going. Unfortunately, I haven't got any direct quotes to give to you today. But how are we going to take this forward? We recognise that this is a good thing to do, and we want parents to be involved in the care of their baby as much as we possibly can. So how can we progress forward? So we recently had some iPads delivered through the LMNS, which is the local maternity system between Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And the aim of these is to enable mothers that are not well enough to come to the special care unit to be able to FaceTime their baby, often initially at that first admission period, when their baby is away and perhaps they're having to have further ongoing care from the obstetric team, to see their baby and to see that they are okay on the SCABU, rather than waiting sometimes several hours before we're free to be able to come and talk to them directly about it. If they can have a link and see, yeah, actually they're okay, they're doing things with my baby, but my baby's okay, that's good. And we want to look to develop that further to involve them on the ward rounds. So when a baby is admitted in the evening or overnight, and we come and see the baby for the first time, it's not uncommon that the mum can't be there at the same time because they are waiting for the obstetric and anaesthetic reviews on the maternity ward and aren't able to come round. So if we can get them on a FaceTime thing to be able to talk to them on that first ward round, it helps them to be part of it right from the start and know exactly what's going on with their baby. And we also sort of wondered about the possibilities with looking at doing this remotely at home. Now, at the moment, obviously, COVID is causing certain restrictions, but actually has helped us in some ways with developing the IT interfaces with parents and patients at home. And at times when there aren't restrictions and parents are looking after other children, doing the school run, dads are going back to work, if we can look at getting links set up for parents remotely, then actually that will allow dads to join in these conversations as well. And if dads aren't allowed on the unit because of infection restrictions, again, allowing them to be part of the care, even if they can't be there physically, to be there virtually, and they can then be part of the ward round to discuss their worries and concerns, which may be different to the mums, because mum's been there and knows what's going on, and dads might have other questions that they've not raised, and to be able to be part of it virtually, if they can't do it really, would be great. And the other area that we're looking to improve the parents' experience is there's a feature within our Badgernet, which is the record of the baby's care during their stay, that has a parent access feature where we can upload pictures and comments. Baby did a poo, baby had a feed, various things that they've done that parents can have as a record and can share with friends and family that can't be able to come in at the moment due to visiting restrictions. So that's where we're looking at taking this forward for the next steps for our babies and families. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you very much. And for those of us who have known, taking a child home on the first few days is absolutely frightening and horrific. The idea of parent-led visits onto the ward, I think, is a fantastic idea, and I know the feedback we had has been very positive. So thank you, and thank you all your team for the hard work in making that type of innovation happen to the benefits of new parents and their babies. As you can see, I think we've had a bit of a YouTube technical challenge. So previously you may not have seen me. It isn't that Glenn Burley has suddenly grown a beard and grown hair in the last half an hour. Glenn and I are still socially distanced, as you can see, but hopefully you're now able to see me as chairman. We now move on to questions from the public. Sorry, before we go there. Therefore, we're moving now on to the proposal to adopt the annual report and accounts for 2019-20. I am going to propose those. Could I ask Andrew Cotton, as chair of the audit committee, to second them, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second the accounts.
Thank you, Andrew. And can I ask the whole board of directors to vote to adopt the annual report and accounts for 2019-20? Please come off mute if you're not happy to adopt them. Therefore, the annual report and accounts for 2019-20 were adopted. Thank you. We now will move on to questions from the public. And again, just as I said at the start, if people viewing on the YouTube live want to ask supplementary questions, the details of contacting Erica Harmon, the Trust Secretary, are available on the website. So the first question is from Health Watch Herefordshire. I'll read the question and then I'll invite a member of the Board of Directors to answer them. We note Glenn Burley's remarks in the media recently when he stated it will take 4 years to return to normal. in the Observer. We sincerely hope not. The Trust worked intelligently and swiftly to reconfigure the services for the treatment of COVID-19 virus, where clinicians work tirelessly to make changes in days that normally take years. We hope that the Trust can take advantage of new technology and the impetus demonstrated to work with patients whose conditions have deteriorated and diagnosis have suffered during lockdown. We note that Mr. Burley stated that extra bed capacity at the county hospital will be provided. We ask that the community is kept well informed of how the Trust proposes to tackle the backlog of patients waiting for referral and treatment. We ask that the Trust keep Health Watch and the public informed. Glenn.
Yeah, good question from Health Watch, thank you. I mean, firstly, yes, I did do an interview in the Observer. One of the objectives of that actually was to explain how complex it is to restart a range of services in the NHS under the current circumstances. It was relatively easy to stop them, but to start them safely and to take account of staff and patient safety has been quite a challenge for us. We've been able to maintain lots of services throughout COVID, but some of our planned care, some of our elective care was paused. I think I was posed a question. It's been said by the NHS Confederation it could take 4 years. So I said it could take 4 years. It's certainly years, not months. And the reason why I would say that is that, I mean, firstly, we are not out of this COVID crisis. We can expect to see further spikes in activity in different parts of the country. We can expect to have quite a challenging winter with the combination of both COVID and flu and other increases in demand. One of the reasons why we'll expect to see other increases in demand is during the COVID period, there were reductions in some areas where we know the activity will still be out there. So we are gearing ourselves up for potentially issues like late presentation of cancer cases, which potentially would be more onerous to treat and potentially with worse outcomes. So it's going to be a challenging winter period. Just to get us back to a position where we can deliver the levels of care that we were delivering before COVID. We will be slower because we are using PPE and social distancing. We will need more space because we are providing more space between beds, for example, and in departments to ensure that staff and patients are safe. So all of those factors combined means that this will take us some time. You can be assured, though, that we will take this matter very seriously. We've been tackling waiting times in the county over the last few years. They've been higher than other parts of the NHS, and we're very proud of the work that we've done. So we don't want that work to be wasted. People waiting for planned surgery are suffering as a consequence. And so it's really important that we get those services back up and running and ensure that we get those patients treated quickly. So we will keep updating Health Watch colleagues on that as we move forward. And we'll be working with other parts of the system in order to use the capacity that we have in the wider NHS to deliver that as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you, Glenn. I would just want us to be very transparent throughout this period. The complexity of turning on the full range of services and getting the waiting list down is a mammoth logistical and practical challenge for everyone in the NHS. COVID-19 is a nasty disease. It's a nasty disease for those who suffer it, their families, and for our staff who aim to help our patients. What I would ask from members of the community is the more you socially distance, the more you wear a mask out in public, and the more you wash your hands, the less likely this horrible disease is going to affect us in the future. But a second wave is highly probable, and I'd also encourage members of the public to have their flu jab this year. That will help us and it will help you. Moving on to the second question, which is from Clive Thomas, the Mayor of Leominster. I am the Mayor of Leominster and was on the ambulance service for 40 years, 20 years as a paramedic. Thank you, Clive. Why do you close the MIUs at Christmas? And what do you intend to do during the rest of the year? A suggestion is to employ a paramedic who has had some experience. They can even write prescriptions these days. This could help solve the overcrowding at A&D in Hereford. Jane Ives, our Managing Director, would you care to answer that for me, please?
Thank you, Russell. Probably people are aware the MIUs have stayed closed due to COVID, needing to keep all our environments COVID safe. So I'll answer in two parts. One is, why do we close at Christmas, or in fact during the winter, and what do we do about workforce in terms of paramedics? So the first is, we've, over the last few years, we have closed in the winter as part of a planned strategy to make sure that we can provide sufficient experienced staff in the main A&E to deal with winter pressures, which really means that we have more sick patients coming through more frequently, and so we need to concentrate our experienced staff in one place. But there is a review of how minor injury care is delivered across the county, which had started, and that's led by the CCG. It has been suspended because of COVID, but how that care is going to be delivered in future, that discussion with the public will start again when it's the right time to do so. In terms of paramedics, absolutely, it's a really good idea, and it's something that we did a couple of years ago. In fact, I think we had at one time, 6 paramedics employed in the emergency department. What happened was, though, those paramedics didn't stay for very long, and there's a variety of reasons for that, and it remains open as a career option for paramedics, but doesn't seem to be particularly popular with them. So whilst I wouldn't rule that out, it hasn't so far been shown to be a solution to gaps in our emergency department workforce.
Thank you, Jane. We then got a very long question, which I will read out in full, just out of respect to the author, who was Jennifer Shutt, a constituent in the Central Ward. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to put to you the following questions and your argument justifying the use of agency staff over your own professional, competent, caring Wye Valley nursing staff at a considerable lower cost to Wye Valley. Qualified nursing staff have requested to cover many a shortfall of qualified nursing staff on shifts. They have been told that they cannot, because agency staff are filling any expected or unexpected temporary vacancies. As a taxpayer, I do not understand why this is happening, when agency staff are paid approximately 3 times more than that of Wye Valley nurses' hourly rate, excluding the agency fees on top. This must be a colossal amount of extra money out of the hospital's budget. The conversation I overheard also said agency staff are unable to do certain nursing procedures, so Wye Valley staff have to be found to do them instead. They are not familiar with the shift routines and do not appear to have the same enthusiasm and commitment to patient care. Wye Valley nursing staff would know the particular needs of the patients on their ward. Wye Valley's accountable training needs mean they are up to date with all Wye Valley procedures, protocols, and all equipment, including the input of any information technology relating to each patient. They are also familiar with the logistics of the ward and the hospital in general. As they are Wye Valley employees, their accountability is easier to address than agency nurses. Some years ago, the government told the board of directors and the hospital management to greatly reduce the use of agency staff. Why then is this still happening when Wye Valley have dedicated Wye Valley nurses offering to do overtime? Is engaging all these agency nurses a method of fragmenting the NHS? Wye Valley nurses could be given extra financial incentives if they covered extra shifts, instead of paying such exorbitantly large fees to agencies. Extra staff could be employed by Wye Valley to correct the imbalance after a feasibility study takes place comparing the costs of agency staff compared to Wye Valley staff. We all as taxpayers should be advised of the total cost of using agency nursing staff per annum. Consideration already mentioned would not only benefit patient care, but also reduce these incredibly unnecessary high costs out of the hospital budget, which could be filled by overtime, in-house, or by the employment of extra Wye Valley staff. So Jennifer, thank you for your question. Lucy, would you care to answer it for us, please?
Certainly, and I think the first thing I would want to say is our own nurses are enabled to work overtime or indeed work on our bank. In all the time I've been at Wye Valley, 4 years, it has been our ambition to reduce agency spend and indeed eliminate it completely. And we heard Glenn earlier talk about the successes we've had thus far. Our spend year on year has reduced, and last year we spent £200,000 less on agency than the previous year, and we're on trajectory to spend even less this year. We have got a master vendor provider that provides our agency nurses, and that is a way to keep costs down, and has proven really successful in the last 3 years. One of the reasons we've had such great success is our ability to recruit to our own substantive posts. And again, we've seen success year on year. So about 3 years ago, we started with about 120 nursing vacancies. And we've just heard today, we're down to very low numbers, about 30 full-time equivalent vacancies in our workforce. So that's absolutely fantastic. The question also asked questions around why don't we have competitive bank rates. So we reviewed our bank rates about a year ago as now and relaunched them in the summer of last year. And what we did was make sure that those bank rates were competitive across the Herefordshire and Worcestershire NHS, wider NHS. And we introduced an incentive scheme and a bonus scheme for individuals to enable them and make working on the bank attractive. And what I can say is that we have gone from prior to the launch of those new rates last year of only about 10 full-time equivalent registered nurses filling shifts on our bank. And we're now in excess of 35 full-time equivalents working on our bank each week. That's all the points I wanted to cover. I hope I've covered everything in the question, but if I haven't, then please do come back during the next 48 hours and I'm happy to pick up on any further points.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Jennifer, for your question. Just a couple of points I would add. You can see the monthly spend of agency in the public management accounts which come out, the board report which comes out every month and is available on the website. Every month, we as a board of directors do deep dives into agency spend, so it is very much a focus because it has been a challenge. I think one of the other things just to recognise is the team at Wye Valley have done a phenomenal job over the last couple of years in terms of nurse recruitment. The Wye Valley team are the most successful in the foundation group, actually, particularly recruiting international nurses. But we have got incredibly busy over the last couple of years as we have improved waiting times up until COVID-19, and as the A&D has got much busier. So our need for nurses has actually increased enormously over the last 3 and a bit years since Glenn and I and the new team joined. But Jennifer, thank you for your question. And I'd like to move on to two, again, one's a short question, one's a long question. They're both with respect to our Sustainable Development Plan. So I'll read out the questions and then I'll ask Alan Dawson, please, to answer them. The first is from Councillor Diana Toynbee. It has never been more important for Wye Valley Trust to engage actively in improving quality of life in Herefordshire and responding to the ecological emergency facing us. What progress has been made on the Trust's Sustainable Development Plan since it was drawn up, and what have been the main obstacles to its implementation? I could find no updates that are less than 10 years old. And question which is related to it, which is why I'm doing them both together, from Maggie Setterfield, says the Wye Valley NHS Trust's new 2025 Sustainable Development Management Plan, greenwash statements on travel, page 12, and green space, page 14, are unfortunately not supported by actions. All the cycle racks were removed from the front of the county hospital when the AMU went up last year and have not been replaced. And the last meaningful area of green space between Stonebow and Union Walk, which staff and visitors could enjoy during the break, was bulldozed at much the same time for more car parking. All the space around the headquarters and Longfield House is consumed by hundreds of staff cars, by contrast to a miserable, dilapidated cycle shelter at the side of the building. The cycle shelters at the MRU, Daycase Unit, Car Park 2 and cages behind the Oxford Suite do not offer a meaningful incentive for staff or visitors to use sustainable travel. Will the Wye Valley board members set a good example and give up their cars and travel sustainably to Hereford Hospital from now on? Just before I ask Alan to reply, Maggie, just so you're aware, Glenn and I both live near Warwick, so it would take us quite a long while to go and get on our bike over to Wye Valley, but we do both drive electric cars, just as an aside. So, Alan, could you please answer Councillor Dana Toynbee and Maggie Setterfield's points, please?
Thanks for that, Chair. I'll try and address those in turn. In terms of the Sustainable Development Management Plan, we brought an update of that actually to our board a couple of months ago and approved that, and that will be the blueprint for moving forward. We will be publishing that on our website very shortly, and indeed, if you look in the annual report, there's a link there that you can email me from, and I can make that available to members of the public if need be. In terms of progress, the actual plan itself sets out the kind of progress that we've made in recent years. I mean, not least making sustainability one of our corporate objectives for the current year, and really pushing it up the agenda in the organisation. We're currently working with a partner to look at an integrated energy centre that uses renewable technologies. We've reduced our travel significantly by implementing virtual meetings and consultations. Obviously, we were planning to do that and starting to do that as an organisation anyway, and obviously the recent events has hastened that along. In terms of our new ward environment that we're currently building, we're aiming to achieve a BREEAM Excellent classification for that, which is it checks the sustainability of the building. We're focusing on staff sustainability by very much looking after their health and well-being. Lots of efforts around that. Working with Sodexo, our partners, to reduce the use of single-use plastics. And we got awarded capital last year after a successful pilot project to replace lighting in a lot of our buildings with LED lighting. So there's an awful lot going on. There's even more in the document itself. In terms of some of the specific issues mentioned in the second question, the bike racks by the main entrance weren't actually removed. They were moved. There was signage put in place at the time, but they were moved just a short distance away to the Ironbrook complex. And we had to move them away because they were in the way where they were. It wasn't safe in terms of when the acute medical unit was built. So we had to move those away. And yes, there is car parking on the Orchard site. And that's a temporary facility that we put in place whilst we were building the acute medical unit and whilst we're building the new wards. And we'll obviously need to look at car parking. Obviously, we have a duty to provide car parking for our staff and our patients. But we are looking to reinstate green spaces around the site. And one of the areas we've highlighted for that is around the new wards, because those new wards are going to have a focus around geriatric care. We're certainly looking at providing a green space around that. And finally, in terms of travel and travel plans. We're actually in the process. One of the actions in the Sustainable Development Management Plan is to update our travel plan as an organisation, and we're well on the way to doing that, encouraging the use of public transport, promoting walking, cycling and car sharing, reducing our business travel as an organisation. And our board members are a microcosm of that. We're all looking to set an example, whether it's, as the chair said, people replacing their vehicles for electric ones, those that started walking to work, or people like me that cycle in every day. So we're all trying to do our bit, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We do recognise our role, as Glenn said earlier on, as an anchor institution in the community, and therefore our ecological sustainability is incredibly important for us to demonstrate that. Just as an aside, one thing I do worry about as chair is with the enormous and necessary increase in plastic use because of PPE, there will be an issue with the recyclability of that PPE equipment, which I think is a challenge which often isn't talked about. But I hope Alan's answer has sort of demonstrated our commitment and practical actions we are trying to take. But it isn't an easy issue, but we are doing, we are making progress, and we are frankly, I think, doing our best. So those were all the questions we've had from members of the public. Just to reiterate what I've said before, if members of the public want to ask subsequent questions, you can do so through the website. We now want to move on to recognition of achievements of our staff. As we said, this has been an extraordinary 4 months in particular, but the whole year has been a year of phenomenal activity and commitment from everyone within the Trust. So Jane Ives, I'll pass over to you to recognise the achievements of some of our real heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. If you could move the slide on, please, Erica. In some ways, I'm going to expand on some of the comments that Glenn and Russell have already made. Recognising staff, and in fact, actually this year, recognising the public as well, is an important role for the board, and the AGM gives us an opportunity to recognise and thank in public. This slide is some of the Thursday evening claps where our staff are also thanking other key workers, and we know that the rest of the population were thanking us at the same time. Next slide, please, Erica. Each month during the year, we recognise a staff and team of the month at our board meetings. These are drawn from all staff are nominated. We've had over 200 nominations over the course of the year, and anybody can nominate someone for a Going the Extra Mile award. And from those, each month we publicly thank an employee and a team of the month. All that changed really on March the 23rd. I mean, we've continued to carry on the scheme, and so staff still continue to be nominated and they receive a certificate, but not the in-person thank you by one of the executive team now. But also it all changed because the pandemic has also meant that so many of our staff have gone the extra mile, in fact the extra 10 miles, and you really couldn't pick out individuals to thank in the way that we normally do. Move on the slide, please. But again, I really would like to recognise the fantastic support that we've had from the residents of Herefordshire and from Paris. As I say, they've come out every Thursday night to clap and to thank NHS staff, carers and key workers. And it meant a huge amount to staff to know how well supported we were. You provided pizzas, Easter eggs, members of the population and the public manufactured scrubs in your own homes. There were volunteers who used motorbikes to take medicines out to patients, and I think it's fair to say that we all felt the love during this time. But I also want to thank the public for their really good compliance with the lockdown rules. I think the huge effort made by the public, aligned with the services that we and the rest of the system provided, meant that we really sadly lost 122 people in Herefordshire to COVID, but it could have been so much worse. And as Russell said earlier, we really continue to depend on you to follow the rules as gradually our lives are unlocked, and hopefully the levels stay very low. Next slide, please. So usually at this point in the AGM, we recognise a member of staff and team of the year and an innovation of the year. But as I said, this year is different. There's just too many. We employ 3,612 staff. And we really want to recognise all of them for their commitment, for their courage, for their flexibility, for their hard work, who've responded so brilliantly to the pandemic. Almost every member of those staff has had to work in a different way over this last 4 months. And so what I'm going to run through now is quite a long list, but a really important list of examples of what our staff have been doing and how they've been working differently. So this is in no particular order. So first of all, literally hundreds of doctors, nurses, midwives, therapists moved from their usual roles and their usual rotas and into new areas of working in ITU, on COVID wards, in the emergency department, which we had to split into two. So we had to run 2 emergency departments. We've had to run 2 ITUs for COVID and non-COVID patients. And 466 staff were retrained by our very brilliant education and training team during this time. Our health visitors, school nurses and nursery nurses were a group that a lot of their usual work just disappeared overnight, and they weren't able to do it either at all or in the same way. So this group of staff became the group that provided a swabbing service for all of the health and care staff in Herefordshire. They retrained as phlebotomists, and so they provided the blood tests for all, again, health and care staff for antibodies, but also for patients who were receiving virtual clinics. But if they needed a blood test, they could go to a local community hub, have their blood taken by that team, and then get the results later on. And lots of those results were provided by a group of shielded staff. So these were some of our staff who weren't able to come to work. They weren't able to do their normal jobs at home, and there were lots who were able to do their normal jobs at home. And so that group of staff became the team that communicated with staff and patients to let them know their results. Some of our staff have relocated to the Nuffield Hospital, and again, a really big thank you to the Nuffield Hospital for providing us with their facilities. And that's so we could continue to operate on patients who'd been diagnosed with cancer, and our community dentist provided emergency access to dentistry for the whole of the population. Erica Herman, who's our company secretary, who's doing the slides tonight, she put together a logistics team drawn from across the organisation, and that meant that we've never run out of PPE. It's been a really creative effort working with national, with local and voluntary suppliers. And they had to keep testing and retesting our staff on specialist protective equipment because the national supplies kept changing, but none of our staff have gone without PPE at all. The national discharge policies changed literally overnight, and these were rapidly put in place by our discharge team. And we implemented a new integrated Home First team between the Wye Valley community workforce and the council community workforce. And that was implemented in 7 days flat. So many more people have been able to be discharged rapidly and cared for at home rather than staying in hospital. I mean, an ambition that we'd had and we were going to develop over the course of this year, but it was achieved incredibly quickly. Our IT department rolled out 400 laptops so that staff could work from home, and did that again in a matter of a few weeks. And many teams have worked mainly from home during this time. So our finance team, our information team, many of our radiologists have been able to report images from home. And our EPR team supported, again, really rapid rollout of virtual clinics, so that doctors, nurses, therapists, midwives are now undertaking 50% of outpatient activity as a virtual clinic. So the person stays at home and is able to receive that care either over the phone or through a video link. And again, supported by community hubs where they need additional tests. So all of these staff have completely redesigned the way that their services have delivered. And a lot of these changes are going to stay in place for the future, because it's really good for patients as well as being good for staff as well. So our patient experience team worked 7 days a week, normally work 5 days a week. I mean, that's true for many of our staff actually, who are used to work 5 days a week and have converted to 7 day a week working. And they established the heart-to-heart and the thinking of you scheme. So whilst visiting hasn't been, we haven't been able to allow visiting for most patients, it's allowed people to stay in touch, and they've deployed iPads so that, again, patients can contact their relatives using iPads where that's been at all possible. Our human resources team, with many others, have established a staffing hub to manage the redeployment of all of those staff and all of the staff who've been shielded. We put in place much more enhanced wellbeing and support services for staff, because this has been incredibly difficult. And as part of that effort, our staff side representative, again, have been really active and incredibly supportive all of the way through. Estates, EBME and Sodexo partners, they've designed and put in place quick changes to our estate so that we can create COVID-safe environments. A massive effort, again, across all of those teams. And I have to mention as well the communications team, who have been absolutely exceptional. They've provided a daily briefing to all staff. The rules, the regulations, the guidelines, all through this have changed very quickly, sometimes on a daily basis. And they've been at the heart of making sure that we get that communication out to staff so they know what to do, what the latest guideline is. And lastly, I want to recognise the executive team and the senior doctors, nurses and managers who've led this response absolutely brilliantly. Particular call outs, I think, to John Barnes, to Lucy Flanagan, to David Mowbray and to Robbie Deedy, who've been very much at the heart of planning and implementing the response. I hope I haven't missed any key groups out. I'm sure they'll let me know if I have. I could have just name checked 3,612 staff to let them know how proud we all are of their achievements, because that has been such has been the level of change and innovation. And talking of innovation, there are 5 teams who have been particularly creative and innovative in the way that they've delivered their services and delivered the response that we have. And what we've asked them to do is to put together a short video so that they can tell you their stories in their own words of what it's been like working through the pandemic. So if you'd like to run that, Erica, I'm just really hopeful now that that's going to work.
Within weeks of the pandemic, the Chinese people were able to sequence the entire virus and published it on the web. And then the WHO approved it. So once we knew the entire genomic sequences, designing a test to detect the virus is simple. When you design a test, you need to make sure that it's sensitive, it's specific, you don't miss any positives, you don't give out any false negatives. So that was the biggest challenge, to get as close as possible to give a true positive and not give a false negative result. Fortunately, we had an advanced technology already in our lab, which we're using for a stool PCR. We introduced on 2nd of December 2019. We realized that piece of technology can be used to do the COVID PCR testing. So all we needed was to do a validation exercise. So within couple of weeks, I would say, we were able to roll out with a test, and we launched it on the 16th of March 2020, which is very, very early in the pandemic.
We had to make sure that we were ready to receive any patients that were coming into the organisation, that we had the correct pathways, that we had the correct measures in place, and whether that was to do with the personal protective equipment that the staff had to wear, and that they knew how to wear it, but also the built-up environment. How did they access the hospital? How did we keep them safe and the other patients within the organisation safe as well?
If you delay in giving a result, then you will struggle to cohort positive and the negative patients. So, and then it creates a bottleneck at the front door. So when patients coming in with respiratory symptoms, so it creates a bottleneck. But if you give a quick testing, so the negative, you can take them to a COVID negative area. If you know positive, they can then be taken to the COVID positive area and treated appropriately.
With the infection prevention team, we went out, we were working within the clinical setting, making sure those staff at the front line were aware of what their personal protective equipment was, that they had been appropriately tested so that that piece of equipment fitted them correctly, so we knew that they were safe going into infectious areas. We also worked with the COVID logistics team. This is the team who have been responsible for ensuring that the organisation has all the equipment that we need, such as our gloves, aprons, masks. They've worked tirelessly throughout all of this.
I'm proud of the team that I had. I'm proud of the excellent teamwork that we were able to come out. I'm also proud of the support we got from the trust. Right from the beginning, right from the early stages, they were so supportive.
Oh, extremely proud, but not just of the team that I work in, but with all the people that we've actually had the joy and the stresses with over the last few months. We are a small team, but we have worked with a number of people throughout the last few months, and we would not have achieved what we had without the help of all these other people.
So when COVID hit, it was really important that for us, we supported the organisation in reducing the patients' footfall into the hospitals.
One of my teams is the Referral Management Centre, and that team took, I think it was about 10,000 calls in the first couple of weeks post-lockdown. So it was an incredible commitment from that team.
So for us, it was looking at a couple of things. Helping or digitalising the staff, so enabling the staff to be able to work from home or more remotely, providing them with things like laptops and access to their folders and files. We also looked at virtual outpatients, so we know that we've got patients that would normally come into hospital to have an appointment with a consultant. So what we needed to do is, in order to help maintain patient safety and to ensure they still received care, we needed to find a way of being able to continue to do that, but through virtual means. When we were looking to set up the community phlebotomy, we didn't have the resource initially that we needed. So some nursery nurses were redeployed, if you like, to help. So they took up the challenge. It wasn't something they would normally do, take bloods. So they agreed to receive some intensive training. They then worked together to provide that service to the patients in the community.
We decided that because we had some really innovative work going on in our labs, that we could set up a swabbing service and a staff testing service as well. We in the end managed to do same-day swabbing, so a member of staff could ring up in the morning, they would get their slot in the drive-through in the afternoon and get their results by the next day. As we've started to move into what we call restoration, when a patient arrives at the hospital, they have their temperature tested. We ask a variety of questions to make sure that they are symptom-free of COVID. We also provide a mask. Also within the outpatient areas, we've made sure that waiting areas are distanced. We're encouraging patients not to come early for their appointments so that we maintain the flow and the distance within the departments.
We didn't have months to plan stuff. It was days, weeks, hours. We had to think on our feet. But again, I think it just shows the resilience and the commitment that people have to either, their jobs or to just making sure that, we did what we could for the patients of Hereford.
I'm incredibly proud of everybody that's been involved in the areas that I've worked in, the dedication and the amount of time that people have put in, actually pushing through new ideas really, really rapidly and not being afraid to actually try something different.
People stood up, they embraced change, they worked in a way that was not normal to them, they came out of their comfort zone, so you've got people not doing their normal jobs, and actually I suppose it sounds a bit of a cliche, came together as a family. We all just kind of rolled up our sleeves, dug in and did what was needed.
We have got a unit with 6 beds, and we were looking to increase our bed capacity by, eventually we got up to something like 7 times the number of beds. Each ITU bed or each ICU patient requires nursing and medical staff and all the ancillary staff and support staff that go with that, like physios and dietitians and pharmacy, and each bed has to be equipped with ventilators and pumps and monitors, and so all that we had to find.
We had a lot of staff come from day case, and that's a completely different way of nursing patients, so the stress levels for them must have been enormous. And also, underlying that, they were faced with their own concerns regarding COVID. Am I going to take it home to my relatives? Do I have people at home that are vulnerable?
We didn't get overwhelmed. At times it was tricky, because people were scared.
All the training that they have and the experience that they have of the things that we were doing wasn't necessarily making these patients better, and that it was the disease process that just carried them through to one end or another. One thing that I know that all the senior members of staff really struggled with was the relatives, not allowing relatives in, and we all struggled with that, all of us, yeah. So, which is why we put into place the video conferencing, the telephone calls that they could make, not necessarily being able to talk to the patient because they're ventilated, but that they could actually feel that they'd said things that they needed to say.
I was very impressed by how the teams all just worked together and just rolled their sleeves up and got on with the job at hand, knowing how difficult it was to work with the personal protective equipment, particularly, nursing staff working long hours in very tight-fitting masks.
You feel very isolated, obviously, in the hospital because you're in a bubble, you're in ITU, you're in PPE, there's nowhere open in the rest of the hospital really. Less people milling about, you can't just go and have a chat with someone as you would normally. So to know that people were supporting us outside was really helpful, I think.
Initially, there was a requirement because of COVID-19 to try and provide some extra support into care homes across Herefordshire, well actually nationally. The programme was developed as an NHS offer from Ruth May, who's the Chief Nursing Officer. We would support with regards to, look to how they were managing with personal protective equipment, infection prevention issues. We'd look at, how they were managing with the welfare of their patients, of their residents. Staff welfare, just, how they were managing. Was there anything that they needed? Was there anything that they wanted from us or any of our partnership organisations just to help them through this a difficult time?
So there was a very standardised format of how the training was delivered, and that followed through from super training to local trainer, and then the local trainers would take it out to the care homes and they would then deliver it to their staff on a train-the-trainer process.
Herefordshire was, as a
an area was really proactive in getting together. So the partnership organisation, your clinical commissioning groups, tourists, the local county council and public health were, along with Wye Valley Trust, were really proactive in getting together as a network to provide support for the care homes. And Wye Valley Trust was obviously seen as the perfect organisation to provide that practical aspect of support for the care homes.
Each session involved training on hand washing, on donning PPE and doffing PPE, and physically going through the process to make sure that everybody had worked through it and understood it for themselves.
I'd like to thank obviously the partnership organisations that we worked with, but also specifically to the senior nurses who supported with this project, and the temporary staffing department in Wye Valley Trust who have supported some of the care homes with staff.
I'd like to thank the infection control team for Wye Valley Trust. I'd also like to thank Tracy Bradley-Vogue for helping provide the administrative support. Also the local council for providing some of the trainers and helped us roll out the programme, and also to the care homes themselves for welcoming us in and helping us roll out this education and embracing it.
I'm very proud of the team that pulled it all together. Incredibly proud of Herefordshire as a county, that the multi-organisations that have pulled together like this. Incredibly proud.
We started seeing the peak coming up to us. It was known already that early intubation and putting people on a ventilator was maybe not the best way to go, first way. So we then realized that keeping people off ventilators was very important. And one way in which you can do that is by providing continuous positive pressure via a mask. So you don't put a tube down people's throat, you just put a mask on their face, and you provide oxygen via this mask and a bit of pressure, and it helps to keep the lungs open. So what we realised that our usual supply chains for using CPAP and equipment we couldn't use, and we then realised that we've got in the community CPAP, and we could use that to transfer a domiciliary, a home-based service into an acute service in the hospital. We had to modify a lot of the mask and all the tubing and things between the patient and the machine to make it work for the hospital setting. After that, we had to test it. And it meant that we started testing it on ourselves. So we put each other on the machines with these circuits and the tests until we were satisfied that it delivered the right amount of oxygen and that the pressure was maintained in the circuits for the entire time. We used this equipment then to treat 1 in 5 of the patients admitted to Hereford County Hospital with coronavirus.
Setting up an early supported discharge scheme was very important because for our respiratory patients, we wanted to get 2 groups of people out of hospital in the best supported manner. So one was the COVID infected group, because obviously we didn't want them to be in hospital unless they really had to, because they'd be a risk to staff and also to other vulnerable patient groups. And then obviously the other group we wanted to get home as quick as possible was our usual respiratory, very vulnerable, shielded type patient. While our junior doctors normally take part in the general medical rota, we established a ward respiratory or lung disease rota, and they were very, very good again in providing a 7-day cover rota. And these junior doctors would often have to stay in hospital accommodation if it was concerned that one of their flatmates or housemates had any sort of illness. So they become a very tight-knit group of junior doctors. It was an honour to work with them. They became very IT savvy and made me very IT savvy very quickly. And so communication between myself as a senior doctor up to management and down to our juniors became very slick and very fast.
You can see it's pulling it against the wall.
A negative pressure room is designed to extract the air out of a room, thereby decreasing the burden of infective particles in that room. For example, TB patients for respiratory disease would be our usual group where we want to apply negative pressure. So by providing more negative pressure rooms, we'd provide a safer environment for our staff to work in. To demonstrate the suction, by placing a piece of paper, you could see it's been stuck against the door jamb, and once the principle was proven, everybody was happy, was doing what it's doing. They went on, and I think it did 2 rooms a day afterwards, and very rapidly went through the whole ward and rolled it out to the other wards.
It was a team effort, and I can't go without saying thank you to my colleagues and the respiratory physiology team, who were excellent. We had fabulous junior doctors and nursing staff, and all the patients we've treated. And I think we can't talk about this without saying a special word to all those families who lost somebody over the last couple of months through COVID-19.
It was a very dark time when I remember sitting in the garden, my wife was talking about, did I have to do this? What was our response going to be? Because we're both frontline workers. I remember on a Friday night doing our will on the internet with a solicitor, and some sort of pretty dark times. But on the other times, it was extremely stimulating, invigorating. You could argue I spent 25 years of my professional life preparing for this once-in-a-career opportunity, and it may well define me as my career point.
Thank you very much, Jane, and for putting that presentation together. And I'm sure all of us, as we watch it, are incredibly grateful to the superhuman efforts of everyone involved in helping patients and their loved ones through, as we said earlier, this awful disease. And as a board of directors and as the chair of the organisation, I can't tell you how proud I am. And Alex's comments at the end there, where he said this may be a career-defining time, it is a situation which hasn't gone away. It might have abated at the moment. But as we close tonight's meeting, I would just like to reiterate to members of the public, you will help the NHS, you will help social care, you will help members of the community if you continue to practice safe social distancing, you wear a mask when you're out as much as possible, you wash your hands far more than you normally would, and you have your flu jab before the winter outbreak. I'd also like to thank all of the board of directors who have led the organisation over the last year. Under Glenn Burley and Jane Ives' stewardship, the executive team have again had a phenomenal year of progress. And I'd like to thank my non-executive directors, led by my deputy chair, Richard Humphreys, for all of their hard work. It's been a particularly challenging time for them as well. So that's the end of this year's AGM. We will have an AGM again next year, hopefully in a different situation where we'll be able to meet again physically, but the timing and date and location of the AGM next year will be made available in due course. Thank you very much.